Well, I have 2 weeks before my sabbatical, 2.5 if you count the 22nd, and so I feel like I get to make these 2 weeks count in what I get to bring to you and share with you and to set us up for where we're headed as a community. A couple of weeks ago, I was sitting in a cafe in Nairobi, and I was meeting with a friend of my grandfather's for breakfast, and he has traveled the globe with my grandfather, planting churches, working with movements of Jesus who are well over 100,000 people. I was just in a church with a church in Korea last week that has 500,000 people that meet there every single Sunday. And this is not an abnormal thing that's taking place all over the globe. And I sat down with this individual, Les, and I said, Les, why don't we see this happening in the States? Why can't we see this movement happen here? Like, what gets in the way of us experiencing what the rest of the world experiences on a normal basis? And he asked me a question that has been reverberating with me ever since he asked this question. Have you ever had someone ask you a question that just stuck with you? Like it was so annoying that you couldn't answer it? But he asked me this question. He said, how many people at Humanity Church fully understand that they are a part of the most important movement in human history? And he said, not just understand that they are sitting in a chair observing it, but how many of them understand that they are an integral part of the most important movement in human history? That they're not just watching it happen, but they are the movement. And that question has stuck with me. That question has been eating away at me. It has captured my imagination. It has left me wonder, how do we create a movement where that has taken place? Because if we were to assume that that is true, that you and I right now were a part of the most important movement in all of human history, that we were inviting people into life from death, that we were inviting people to be set free from every single thing that has held them back, is currently holding them back, and will hold them back forever. That their lives, their legacies, their future will forever be altered as a result of being connected to this movement of Jesus. That there isn't just a God out there who is benevolent, but there is a God who has come for them and has sacrificed for them and is actively looking to partner with them. And we are not just spectators of this, watching it cosmically unfold out there going like, wow, this is so amazing. Look at what God is doing all around us. But that we were actually plan A. That we were the catalysts that God was actively using to engage the most important mission in human history. What would we do? How would we change? How would our lives look dramatically different as a result of that reality? Now, I am a fervent student of what changes people. That is one thing that I love the subject. I have dedicated my life to figuring out what is the equation for human change that allows us to move from one version of ourselves to another, and what's the secret sauce that comes with that. Here's what I do know that is at the core of any type of change, is that whatever you value in life is what drives your life. That whatever you value in life it's the motor, it's the engine, it's the fuel, it is the rocket behind your life that moves your life forward. Now here's the thing. We have what we say we value. Because if I was to ask you, what do you value? Most people actually say very similar things. It's not usually shocking. People say things like, I value community, and I value family, and I value freedom, and I value the people that I love, and I value the certain hobbies or activities that I have. So there's the things that we say we value, but then there's the things that we actually value. And how many of you knows those are two different things at times? There are oftentimes the things that we say we value that we put down when asked, what are your core values? And then there's what actually value. And here's what I know we value is our actions. I actually can tell you exactly what you value based on your actions, because your actions will always inform you of what you value. See, when our stated values are out of alignment with our actual values, we usually start to blame circumstances as to why our values aren't showing up in life, right? So I can say, like, I value health and then not go to the gym and not eat healthy, and then I usually blame circumstances as to why those are out of alignment, right? I got too much work, I got kids, I got things going on. I can say, like, man, I value community, and then I don't show up at humanity groups, and I don't show up at Sunday mornings, and I'll say, well, I got so much going on that I can't fill in the blank. And so we usually blame the circumstances, and it usually comes out like this: well, I would, but, or I wouldn't do that, but, or I wish I could, but, or I have to fill in the blank. Any ever been there before? Let's be honest, right? How quickly we move to blaming our circumstances as to why our values are out of alignment with one another. Now, there are easy ways to test whether or not that's actually true. Because whenever someone tells me, hey, I would, but, or I would love to, but, or I would like to stop, but, I ask them, hey, if I gave you $1 million, could you make it happen? And it's amazing how instantly people are like, oh, of course, I would make that happen tomorrow, right? Or for those people that don't value money, I'll say something like, hey, if your child or a loved one was terminally ill and the only cure was for you to reorganize your life to have that happen, would you make it happen? In a heartbeat. So what that lets us know, it's not about the circumstance. It's never about the circumstances. It's never about the situations that we find ourselves in. It's never about the process that we have in front of us. It is always about what we value, because it is never about those. It's always about what we hold dear that drives our life and moves us forward. I want to read this passage of scriptures in Philippians chapter 3, starting in verse 7, where Paul gives us this powerful passage around what it looks like to live a life fueled by passion and values that move us to life. He says this: but whatever were gains to me, I now consider loss for the sake of Christ. What is more, I consider everything a loss because of the surpassing worth of knowing Christ Jesus my Lord, for whose sake I have lost all things. I consider them garbage, that I may gain Christ and be found in him, not having a righteousness of my own that comes from the law, but that which through faith in Christ, the righteousness that comes from God on the basis of faith. I want to know Christ. Yes, to know the power of his resurrection and participate in his sufferings, becoming like him in his death, and so somehow attaining to the resurrection of the dead. Now that I've already obtained this, or I've already arrived at my goal, but I press on to take hold of that for which Christ took hold for me. Brothers and sisters, I do not consider myself yet to have taken a hold of it, but one thing I do, forgetting what is behind and straining towards what is ahead, I press on towards the goal to win the prize for which God has called me heavenward in Christ Jesus. Now, when I planted Humanity Church, when we started this, there's a lot of things that when you do a startup, and you've never done a startup, that you have to learn. One of those things for me was accounting, that I was never taught in seminary. They don't have an accounting class in seminary. They teach you Old Testament and New Testament and systematic theology and prayer and counseling. They should have a class on accounting, didn't have one. But one of the first things I had to learn early on was how to read this thing called a profit loss statement. And if you work in any type of business, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Every business has what's called a profit loss statement. And it prints out, and it's basically like, here's all the money you spent, and here's all the money that's come in. And you pray to God that that number at the bottom is a positive and not a negative. And because it's called a profit loss, because you look at the profit, and then you look at the loss, and you ask yourself, am I moving forward? Am I falling backwards? Are we in a healthy space? Or are we dying? Are we declining? It's actually a really helpful tool to let you know right away how healthy is the organization, how healthy is the company, how healthy is the business in this. Are you losing or are you saving in this context? Now, this passage, when I read Paul giving us this instructions for life, it reads a lot like a profit loss statement. He informs us that whatever were gains to me, I now consider loss for the sake of Christ. And then he goes on, I consider everything lost. I consider them garbage that I may gain Christ. So Paul is actually giving us a profit loss statement here for life. And he's giving us the formula for how to actually live a life where you actually come out ahead and not at a loss by the time you end your life. See, here's the thing about Paul. Paul had a pretty impressive resume. If you don't know this guy, he wrote most of the New Testament, but he had a pretty impressive resume. He had a very noble background. He came from a very devout Jewish family. He was also a Roman citizen. He was the most devout of the most devout. I mean, when you looked up Paul in the dictionary, he was the religious dude, so much so that he was like going on missions to kill anyone else that did not have the same values as him. I mean, he was like, I want to rid the world of anyone who is not as religious as I am and who does not hold the same values as I am. That's how religious this dude was. And he finds himself in a place where he had the authority and the power and the reputation to do anything he wanted. I mean, this was the guy who had everything: money, fame, prestige, the background, recognition among both Jews and Romans in culture. He had the permission to literally go out and murder human beings, and people were celebrating him. And he looks at all of this, and you would think that all of that would end up in the gain category. You would think that you would look at his life and say, man, he has everything. He has the career, he has the money, he has the prestige, he has the joy. You would think all of that would go under the gain category, but Paul looks at all of this and he says, it's garbage. In fact, he takes all of that and he puts it in the loss category rather than in the gain category. He saw all of it not as an asset, but as a liability in the person that he was longing to become, in the life he was longing to live. See, because here's the thing. The moment that Paul had an encounter with Jesus, the moment that Jesus radically transformed his life and moved him to the person that he was designed to become, his values transformed in an instant. Everything that he had valued, his fame, his reputation, his money, his religion, all of it transformed. None of it mattered anymore. And now he has this powerful shift in values, and it changed how he saw gain and how he saw loss in his life. And this gives us a powerful insight in how we win at this game of life. The question is, how do I win the prize for the game of life that God has actually set me up for? And I want to look at this through three financial lenses that I think will help us understand how to move forward into the life that we were designed to live. See, the first one is really about investment. I was single till I was 28, which had a lot of perks with it because I got to do whatever I want, spend my money wherever I want, and I had a lot of free time. So most of my life was calling up my other single buddies and saying, hey, what do you want to do tonight? It's 10 o'clock, let's go to the movies. Let's hang out till 1 a.m. Let's go back home. Let's do that again tomorrow, right? I wasn't worried about where I was spending my money or where I was spending my time. I just had all the expendable income, all the time, all the energy that I needed. I wasn't really worried about anyone else in my life other than me, and there were lots of perks that came with that until I met Marla. And then all of a sudden, everything shifted. All of a sudden, it was no longer calling up my buddies and saying, hey, you want to go out to the movies at 10 a.m.? It was calling Marla right after work and saying, what are we doing today? It was taking a look at all of the money that was coming in and saying, all right, I know here's what I want to do. Here's where I want to take her. Here's the dates I want to go on. So how do I reorganize my finances to make sure that I'm able to provide for her, to take care of her? And then we get married, and it's a whole different story, right? It is like, all right, we are investing everything here. And in that moment that I met Marla, everything that I value shifted. And because of that, where I invested my time, my energies, my resources, all shifted in that moment. Every extra bit of time she got. Every bit of extra money went towards her in that moment. Every bit of energy, my thought life went to her. And so it shifted where I invested my life. See, you know what you value based on what you invest in. Now, you invest in something. When you think of an investment, you invest in something because it has a good return on value. So you invest in a stock portfolio because you think, man, if I put my money here, I'm going to get the most money back as a result of that. Or if I invest my time into this person, it's going to have the greatest impact as I invest in them over there. And so that's often how we make decisions about where we invest, what's going to give us the greatest ROI, return on investment. Now, have you ever made a bad investment? That's awful, isn't it? It's awful. Have you ever made like a bad financial investment? Maybe you invested in someone that you thought, man, this is going to be a good person to invest in, and it turned out to be a really bad investment by the end of it. Marla and I, in the last year, we made a really bad investment financially. I mean, bad. And so we're like clawing our way out from that. It was one of those things where someone's like, this is a surefire thing. It's going to make you rich. And we're like, cool. And we are clawing our way back out of that. Thank you, stock market, right? But there are times where we make bad investments and we invest in something and the return on investment is not that great. See, Paul said, I had invested a lot into my reputation. I had invested a lot into my religion, and I invested a lot into all of my religious activity, and I invested a lot in my family background and my history, and all the things that society would tell you are the most important things to a human being. I invested all of it in there, and all of it is loss. I didn't gain anything from it. It was a horrible investment at the end of our days. And he found the place that was worthy of all of his investment of energy and finances and time and every part of him. And he says that he was going to invest all of this into knowing Christ. Now, this word knowing can be a little tricky because usually when we talk about knowing something, we talk about having knowledge of something, which seems to be not a great use of our time, energy investment. Like, I'm going to invest my time, energy. I'm going to have some information back to me about what this thing is or who this person is. Unless that is going to move you towards a better person or towards the life you're going to live, it doesn't really matter if you invest in knowledge. See, there's a difference between knowing someone or something, having info on them, and knowing them. See, like, I know Chris Martin, the lead singer of Coldplay. He sings to me every morning in the shower, right? I've been in the same arena with him at least twice, right? So I know Chris Martin, but I don't know Chris Martin, right? If I was to see him on the street, he wouldn't recognize me. I don't know anything about him. He could be the most horrible human being on the planet. I don't know, right? Because I don't actually know Chris Martin. I just have a lot of information about Chris Martin. And there's a massive difference between knowing someone and knowing someone at an intimate level. Saying, man, I am in life with you. I know the intricacies of you. I know how you operate. I know how you love. I know what you hate. I know how you move. I know what passions you. I know what takes away from you. I know you. And Christianity has assumed that by giving us more information about Jesus, that we might know him somehow. And in that, people come to a gathering to hear a talk, to gain more information, or they go to a group just to study a passage, and that doesn't actually mean that you know Jesus. It just means that you have more information about him. And here's the thing. Over the years, it's left people simply with data, with facts, with figures, with information, and people are loaded, in fact, I would say bloated with information about Jesus. Even people for him. And it's left us with very little life change. It's left us with very little transformation. The life that they imagined it would produce. And Paul says, to know Jesus is this. It's to know the power of his resurrection. To know the power of his resurrection. See, and what he is not saying is that you can repeat the Easter story. What he is not saying is that you know, oh, he went on a cross and he died and he came to life 3 days later. That is not the type of knowing that he is talking about. See, when Paul says that you know that he knows the resurrection of Jesus, he is saying that when I look out in my life and I see every place that feels dead and feels hopeless and feels despairing, I know that it will come back to life. I know without a shadow of a doubt that everything that feels stuck and feels stagnant and feels like it's out of my control, I know that all of those things will not just come back to life, but they will be made new and abundant in that place. That every circumstance, every feeling, every experience that is in the grave will one day be out of the grave, walking alive in my life, so there is nothing that will ever hold me back from stepping into the life that I was called to live. See, Paul says to know Jesus is to become like him. That everywhere you walk, every place you step foot into, every place you move towards, every bit of faith and love and hope springs up in you, and that your heart is in sync with who God is at his core, and you are fully alive. There is an intimacy in knowing the God of the universe who has come for you. But here's the thing. Like every relationship, it must be invested in. There must be something that you give towards it. Marla and I have the opportunity to do marriage workshops all over the U.S. together, and oftentimes people will ask us, like, hey, we went through that workshop last year, should we go through it again? And I said, well, you put oil in your car last year. Should you put oil in your car again? See, here's the thing. Relationships don't die because people change. Relationships die because we fail to invest in them. We fail to keep investing in the friendship. We fail to keep investing in the marriage. We fail to keep investing in the organization. We fail to keep our heart fully in, like I am sacrificing over and over and time again for you over here. And the same thing comes with Jesus, that there must be a continual investment into the relationship, and it has to be something worth putting everything into. See, if I were to give you $100,000 a week, and I said, go invest this into whatever you want, every week, let's just say every week you came to Humanity Church, and under your chair was a little envelope with $100,000. This place will be packed, might be a marketing strategy. But if we just looked at that data of where that money went, it would probably reveal to you what matters to you, yes? You could just take a look at the money and go, oh, this is actually what matters to me based on how I invest this resource. I could look, do I invest it in things? Do I invest it in people? Am I cautious with it? Do I trust other people and organizations with it? Do I believe that there is actually more coming so that I don't hoard what I have, but I'm generous with what I have? It could reveal what we do with that. See, the reality is that you are given 10,000 minutes every single week. You walk into this space, and starting right now on your clock, we have just handed you 10,000 minutes to invest in the next 7 days. And where you invest that might be a great indicator of what values you hold dear. If you were just to look at where you invested the 10,000 minutes in the next 7 days, or the last 7 days, or the 7 days before that, you might have a great idea around what matters most. Where does it go invested? See, the question isn't, are you investing your life? The question is, what are you investing your life in? And it might reveal something. See, because some of you have a lot invested in Netflix. Some of you have a lot invested in TikTok and Instagram and Starbucks and fear and insecurity and worry and money and career and drama. And you wonder, why am I not getting the return on investment? Because maybe it's that we are investing it into things that were never actually meant to bring us a return. And we wonder why nothing is coming back to us. See, I dare you just to pull up on your phone your screen time this week. You could do it on an Apple, by the way, and just ask yourself, what have I invested in? And where is the return on this? See, Paul is inviting us to examine, what is the return on investment in the things that I am investing my life into? And is it creating the life that I long to live? Is it creating the return on investment that I'm looking for? Do you know that all will be made new as a result of your investment? Or do you still live a life where most of your 10,000 minutes goes into worry and insecurity and fear and shrinking back and holding yourself and withholding and wondering, can I trust? Can I give? Because where you invest will determine what you value, and what you value will determine the return on investment. See, so one side of this is investment, where I'm investing my resources and my life. But the other side of this is the loss part of it. And it's really a question of, where am I sacrificing? Because that's another indicator of what we value most, what we will sacrifice for. Because have you noticed that every time you say yes to something, you say no to something? That's so annoying, isn't it? It's so annoying. I'm in a season of life right now, to be honest, where I'm getting so many cool opportunities. They're coming my way, and it's very exciting. And I was in Seoul, Korea last week and got to meet with 30 international leaders, and we're starting a movement there that's really exciting. And things are coming. And you know what's really hard? When an exciting opportunity comes my way, and I look at it, and I look at everything else, my children, my wife, humanity, all the things that I prioritize. And when I say yes to something, I know that I'm saying no to something. And there are times where I look at, man, my wife and my kids and humanity are more important than this thing over here. So I'm saying yes to this and no to all these awesome opportunities. I'm saying no to all these things that matter most, that seem so cool over there. And that no is what you sacrifice for your yes, in whatever you say yes to. See, when Marla and I got married, we created a new rhythm, right? So at first it was a lot of investment. It felt like an investment, and then it just became a lifestyle. Where now I'd get home from work, and we'd have dinner, and we'd go out to the movies, and we'd do whatever we want. And let me just tell you, we were selfish. I did not realize it until we had a child. But we could do whatever we want. It would be 10 o'clock at night, and we're like, you want to go see a movie? Yeah, why not? Let's go, right? And then Jackson came along, right? And he I was going to say ruined everything. He changed everything. Because we went from a family who had tons of expendable income, and now we just had tons of diaper bills and tons of formula and tons of baby clothes and tons of expenses, and all the time that we had that went to all the things that we love to do are now going into wiping the booty of this little child and making sure that he stays alive and making sure that he's okay and making sure that all the things that come in with that. And we found ourselves now giving all of the energy that we had to Jackson. Because much like investing, whatever you sacrifice for will tell you what you value most. Whatever you are willing to sacrifice, whatever you are willing to say no to, will also inform you of what matters most to you. Because whatever matters most to you, you will sacrifice for. See, Paul says, I count all the opportunities, I count all the wealth, I count all the reputation, I count all the power and the prestige. I count it all as loss. And I sacrifice it for the sake of knowing Jesus and partnering with him in his sufferings. Now, I get the resurrection part. That's exciting, right? I get to know Jesus, and I get to know that everything will be made new, that all things come back to life, that any area that is in the grave will one day be out of the grave and walking and talking, and that anything that I feel stuck in, one day I will be set free from. That gets the amens, that gets the applause, that gets the go Nathan. And then when Paul says, but I also long to partner with him in his sufferings. That's like, oh no, not as many claps for those, right? That's not as exciting as the resurrection part, right? Why the resurrection? Why the suffering part? It makes sense, the resurrection part, but the suffering part makes less sense. Because here's the thing that comes with sacrifice. Show me what you're willing to suffer for, and I will show you what sets your soul on fire. Show me what you're willing to go through the pain and the suffering and the striving for, and I will show you what lights up your life. I will show you what ignites passion inside of you. I will show you what wakes you up in the morning because you are willing to go through any amount of suffering and sacrifice and pain and anguish to have it happen on the other side. See, here's the thing. There is a suffering and sacrifice that leads to death. There is a suffering and sacrifice that at the end of the day, it will lead to nothing. It will lead to just more pain and more sacrifice and more suffering, which is what most of us think about when we think about sacrifice. In fact, when we think about sacrifice, we think I'm giving something up, and so now this ends up in the loss category. I've given up time for this thing. I've given up money for this thing. I've given up my resources for this thing. I've given up energy or my thought life for this thing. I've sacrificed my own desires. This should theoretically fall in the loss category over here. And it might mean that I end up with less than what I started because I sacrificed for it. And that's oftentimes how we imagine sacrifice and suffering looks like in the profit loss category. And this is usually, when we find ourselves here, this is usually what we call are complaints. How many of you have chronic complaints in your life? Everyone's hand should be raised, right? Let's just be honest, right? You may not be a verbal complainer. I love verbal complainers. We can work with that. It's you silent complainers that are a little tricky, right? Because it comes out very passive aggressively. Don't act like you don't complain, right? You still complain, it just comes out with what you won't do or will do for or to other people, right? But we call those our complaints, where we find ourselves, man, I am giving, and I am sacrificing, and I am suffering, and I'm not getting anything in return, and no one sees it, and no one cares about me, and life isn't the way that it should be, and I wish I had this, and why can't life be like that? And we find ourselves in chronic complaints. We complain about our schedules. We complain about our money. We complain about our time. We complain about our relationships. We complain about our careers. We complain about our kids. And how many of us are willing to go to the grave with our complaints and our sufferings? I mean, look, the reality is most of us will actually go to the grave holding on to the things that we complain about, and we'll never actually do anything about it. See, because if what you sacrifice for reveals the affections of your heart, what that means is that we would rather live in a complaint than suffer through the solution needed to have it turn out. We would rather suffer in our own complaints and be right about how we see the world and why it isn't the way it is and why I can't have and why people don't. We would rather live in the suffering of our complaint than enter into a suffering that would actually transform that into something brand new on the other side. See, I wonder how many of us are actually settling for control and suffering through that rather than engaging our complaints and having something new. I wonder how many of us are settling for comfort because we don't want to have the conversation. We don't want to do the thing. We don't want to engage the circumstance because that would be too much of a sacrifice. So I'd rather just sit here in the sacrifice of my complaint that will eventually move me towards death and despair and hopelessness than actually suffer in a way that would move me towards life on the other side. But that is a life you must sacrifice for. See, don't get yourself twisted. You are sacrificing. The question is your sacrificing moving you towards life, or is it moving you towards death? Because Jesus invites us into a sacrifice that moves us towards life, a sacrifice that moves us towards the person he longs for us to become. Think about it. Why else would he ask us to sacrifice? He is not sitting up in heaven thinking, I need more stuff, right? He's not saying, I need more time, I need more energy, I need someone to do something for me. He's not worried about any of that in the moment. He's not interested in simply your devotion to him. Otherwise, he could force you to bow down to him. So he's not actually too concerned that there's not enough people worshiping him. He's not sitting there going, man, I wish some more people would have given in the offering today. I was going to do something really cool, but now I don't have money for that. Jesus, right? Like, he's not doing any of that, right? He's not up there. He has already actually sacrificed beyond what you will ever be able to sacrifice for him. So he is actually not too worried about your sacrifice. See, the only reason why God would ever ask you to sacrifice for him is so that you can be transformed into the woman or the man that he dreams for you to become. That's the only reason he would ever invite you to sacrifice. See, this is why tithing is so powerful, and we've already given the offering so I can talk about it. See, we don't invite people to tithe, to give 10% of their income, which seems so crazy to some people. Like, you would take 10%, that's a huge chunk for us. And you would say, I'm just going to give this to the movement of Jesus. It seems so crazy. But see, Jesus is not sitting in heaven going, oh man, I needed 10. They gave 2. He's not doing that. See, what Jesus is sitting in heaven is saying, you are stuck sacrificing your life for your bank account, and it is holding you down. It has a grip on you. That type of greed and that type of scarcity has a chokehold on your life. So if you would just give up 10% of what I have given you, it will actually set you free to become the woman or man that you've designed to be. See, that's the power of it. See, in understanding this, that you have been given power through Christ to transform the world, any amount of sacrifice seems easy. See, the problem is we live in a generation that wants the reward without the sacrifice. We're trying to answer the question, how do I get everything I want without ever having to do the work behind it? How do I gain without the loss? And we wonder where our passion went. We wonder where the life, the hope, the joy went in the midst of this, because until you are willing to sacrifice something, it doesn't matter to you. I promise you. In fact, an interesting stat is that for the first time since World War I, the birth rate in America has plummeted. That we have more people dying than people being brought into life here in America. And actually across the world it's taking place. And one of the number one reasons why people are choosing to not have children, there's a lot of reasons why, but one of the number one reasons why people are choosing to not have children is because it interferes with their lifestyle. And so when you look out at, here's my opportunity, do I create new life that I will have to sacrifice for and that I will have to invest in and that I will have to give everything to? Or do I choose to live my life as I want to? This looks more appealing. Now, I'm not saying that there's anything morally wrong with one or the other, but what I am saying is that it reveals a spiritual reality of what is taking place inside of us as a culture. That we would rather choose our priority and our comfort and our preferred lifestyle than sacrifice and invest in something that messes with that. See, some of us sacrifice more on fast food this week than we did on Jesus. And we wonder why we don't get the return. We wonder why we're stuck. We wonder why our lives feel so small. See, if we truly knew that we were an integral part of the most important movement on the face of the planet in all of human history, it would be the most natural reaction to sacrifice everything. No amount of time would be too much. No amount of money would be too great. No activity under heaven would be important. It would be a constant obsession of how do I advance life in the human story. There would be no other option than to be all in. See, just like with investment, the question isn't, are you sacrificing? The question is, what are you sacrificing for, and is it moving you towards life or death? Now, the last part of this equation, if we were going to look at investment and if we were going to look at sacrifice, the last part of this that you really look at a profit loss statement is, am I gaining or am I losing? Am I actually moving forward or am I moving backwards in this? See, I think sometimes our theology is much more informed by the Declaration of Independence than it is by the Bible. See, because we are in the business of pursuing life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And in the pursuit of happiness, we have found ourselves in a space where we are one of the most unhappy generations ever. And we are obsessed with what makes us happy. Is it another car? Is it mushrooms? Is it a podcast? I don't know. Just figure it out, and I will do it, right? Whatever. Well, I am looking for this elusive happiness, and yet many of us are stuck feeling depressed and despairing and dead in our endless pursuit of personal gain, and we will look anywhere and find anything to find it, but what drives that place inside of us? See, what if God actually put a drive for happiness inside of us? That we might search the world to find it, and we might come to the end of ourselves and realize that the only source available for the joy and the fulfillment and the happiness that we are longing for is coming face to face with Jesus. And believe it or not, Jesus is interested in creating increase in your life. He is interested in advancing your life and moving you forward. He is not looking to detract or take away in any way. See, if you are not investing and you are not sacrificing, or you find yourself investing and you're like, man, I'm so busy and I'm giving myself to all this thing and I'm sacrificing here and I'm doing all the things, and you are not seeing an advancement in your life, it just lets you know that you have not yet invested and sacrificed in the one thing that matters, in seeing Jesus face to face. See, Paul says, but this one thing I do, forgetting what is behind and straining towards what is ahead, I press on towards the goal to win the prize for which God has called me heavenward in Jesus Christ. See, we are called to forget what is behind. All the things that this life has given us, all of the striving, all of the greater things that have led us into despair, all the momentary pleasure, all of the things that have taken place in our past, all of the identity and the comfort, we are to forget all of those things and to press on towards what is ahead. The life where all things are resurrected, where things are made new, where suffering is actually the pathway to wholeness over here, where we get to partner with Jesus in bringing this world back to life. See, the problem is so many of us are actually pressing on towards what is behind and forgetting what is ahead. We are so dedicated to staying stuck in our stories about what's possible and not possible and what can happen and can't happen and what has to happen and shouldn't happen in my life that we are actually straining to hold on to what has been. And we have forgotten that there is a God who is calling us into the most important movement in human history. See, I think that the enemy of our generation doesn't have to invite us into sin. He just has to invite us into distraction. To forget that this is all that matters. See, Jesus does not ask you to forget what was and strain to what is to leave you with less. He invites you to win the prize, to gain. He is not inviting you into a smaller life. He is not inviting you into a life where things are taken away from you. He is inviting you to live your life as if this was the only thing that mattered. And investing and sacrificing our life in something that would outlast this life would be the only thing worth giving our energy to. Now, in closing, I could give you 1,000 things that you should do. The problem is, in telling you all the things that you should do, is that you already know it. That's the problem. See, if I was to take a poll here today, and if you heard this message, and I was to ask you just raise your hand, which you don't have to, how many of you know that you should give more? How many of you know that you should reorganize your lives in a way that would reflect your values? How many of you recognize that you should forgive and set yourself free? How many of you already know that you should live life as if all this matters? See, you can live with all the shoulds in the world, and all you will be left with is a pile of should. That's it. Some of you got that, some of you didn't. But until we learn to see all of it as loss, to mourn over where we wasted the 10,000 minutes in the last 7 days, to mourn and weep over that because we gave it away into something that will not last, to notice the energy that we spent on worry about the future, to notice the spaces where we spent money on things that will one day burn, and then when we look at opportunities to give, we say, I don't have any more. The time we wish we could do more, we could live more, we could engage more, and instead of turning our eyes to knowing Him and to know that all things will be resurrected, not just understanding information about Him, but having an intimate relationship with Him, we turn to the things that are temporary. But see, the moment that you understand what truly matters, the moment that your values shift because you have seen Him face to face, is the moment that you'll begin to invest, is the moment you will begin to sacrifice, is the moment that you will begin to gain. And you will look at your life, and when you look at the end of it, you will say, I have won. I have gained. It's not just a life lived with a bunch of stuff and a bunch of endless activities. But you will look at your life and you say, it transformed not only me, but it transformed the world around me. And in that, everything changes. What would it look like if every single one of us knew, not just had information, but knew that we were a part of the most important movement in human history, and not just observing it cosmically happening, but that we understood that we were plan A, and that it starts within us and reverberates and echoes out of us. You just close your eyes for a minute. Today, if you're here and you've not yet known Jesus, and I'm not talking like you have information about Him, but you've I haven't stepped into a relationship with Him. Maybe today, even as you hear this, you're like, man, I knew about Jesus. I had information about Him, but I've never stepped into that type of relationship with Him that has transformed me. This is your moment. And so if that's you and you want to connect to Jesus for the first time today, I'd like for you just to raise your hand. Just say, I want to connect to Jesus today. Who today is like, I want to connect to Jesus for the first time? Awesome. Who else? Yeah. I just want you to pray a really simple prayer. I just want you to say, Dear Jesus, I give you my life. That's it. Dear Jesus, I give you my life. And for those of you who know Jesus, I want to ask you the question that Les asked me in that cafe in Nairobi, and that is, are you aware that you are a part of the most important mission in human history? That you're not just cosmically watching it unfold in front of you, but you are plan A. If that was real, not just an idea, but it became an obsession of your life, how would your calendar change this week? How would your money change this week? How would your time and your energy and your heart, where would your thoughts go to? If knowing Christ was the only thing that mattered, what would look different? Where would you invest? Where would you sacrifice? And what are the gains available? Jesus, I thank you that you did not come as a God to simply control us or manipulate us, but you invite us into the most profound life available. And that you invite us to become partners with you in transforming the world. And so today, Jesus, I ask that you would make us sharply aware that we are a part of the most important, critical movement in human history. And may that value reverberate into every place that we sacrifice, every place that we invest in. That we might, at the end of our lives, say that we gained the prize. We thank you. In Jesus' name, amen.